Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
Venezuela and what comes next after Maduro. Along with the questions about the future of Iran, Venezuela is one of the top issues in global politics. And today, we've got a stellar episode for you. Hello and welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host, and today we bring you my conversations with two different people who both have vast experience in Venezuelan politics. One of them is a journalist still on the ground in Caracas with decades of experience covering politics, and the other, a former politician on the opposition side who was once jailed by Maduro's regime before escaping to the United States. Emilio Figeredo is editor of Analitica, a news website that's been covering politics in that country since the mid-1990s. He's seen the ups and downs of his country and takes a patient view of what should and could come next for his country. Here is our conversation. So, Emilio, here we are a week after the arrest, the abduction, the extraction of Nicolas Maduro, however you want to phrase it. How do you feel about that? How is the reaction in the streets of Caracas when the government is not watching, when the regime is not controlling it?
I think that there is a high level of expectation, of relief, but most of the people continue to be afraid because they're still putting in jail people that express their opinion. They jailed 14 journalists that were just reporting about what was happening, and they released it after Delcy took the president and Maduro is out. But of those 14 journalists, 13 were not Venezuelan. And so the people, and they are having a lot of checking the cars. They stop you, people armed, to see your phone, to see if you have something in a certain way that you are commenting that is not pleasurable to them. So we haven't have the people coming to the street because the regime is still alive. You took the head of the regime and his wife, who are two of the main component of 5 or 6 people that run the business in Venezuela. But the other 4 are still in place. And it's logical that the one who is in charge of the president, who was the vice president, has reached an agreement with the United States that she complies completely, among other things, giving oil to the United States, a lot of boats that were here that were stocked, so they will be transferred to the United States. They will be paid at market price, but will be kept in.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that in a moment, and Delcy Rodriguez in a moment, but you said that people are still afraid. I've heard stories about these groups called colectivos.
They are basically, I would say, not afraid, no, cautious because there still is there Diosdado Cabello, who is the Minister of the Interior and who control all the police and all the repression mechanism is on his hand. And he has made some shows to feel the people that they could be in problem if they profess some joy or satisfaction what happened. But I can assure you that more than 80% of the people are privately extremely happy by what happened, but concerned by the way that the transition to democracy is going to work, because it's full of uncertainty. Ye-
And so there is a question that I want to ask you first, though, Emilio, and that is, we've heard stories about these people called collectivos, a paramilitary group. We're told they go around cities like Caracas on motorcycles. They're armed, and they will stop people, and they will, ask to see their cell phones, check to see if they have messages, text messages, social media posts that are supportive of the removal of Maduro or supportive of President Donald Trump.
or the opposition,
Yeah, and then if so, jail them. Is that happening, or are the Western reports of that overblown?
Well, it was happening the first days. The problem is that these presumed colectivos were not really colectivos. It was the people of the counterintelligence of the Ministry of the Interior that, instead of doing what they used to do with masks and all black and big rifles, they started to do it, but disguised as civilian. So to make people feeling that the collectivos was working. The collectivos were not moving at all. So they transformed this. It's called the DGCIM, Contrainteligencia Militar. No, it's a body controlled by Diosdado Cabello, and they put it. Strangely enough, the place where most of the things happen is very near of the quarters where this police body exists. So they were trying to.
So it wasn't really the paramilitary group.
It was not really an uprising. No, it was something disguised but handled by the Diosdado Cabello, who is the only one who doesn't accept the agreement inter alia that happened between the actual vice president, the president in charge, and the U.S. government. He's, we could say, is a radical sector, and he's still today the Minister of the Interior, which is the Minister of Interior handle all the security bodies, police, and also what you call intelligence services.
Okay, so I want to ask you about Delcy Rodriguez, the fact that she is still in power, the fact that
Temporary, I would say.
Maria Corina Machado is not. You've heard some, expressions of concern in the American media, I'm sure, saying, "Well, why didn't you install Machado?"
Because it's not the time is not ripe for that.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to ask you about. Is my understanding is that if they tried to put her in, the security services might just kill her.
Yes, well, I think that they have first to stabilize the country in security terms. I believe and I know they are already in contact with key people in the army, which are willing. Even there was a possibility that a military joint would have taken care of the country, but they prefer, and I think it was wise.
Like a junta.
Like a junta, yes. The junta is ready. The junta is ready if Delcy doesn't comply. And that has been handled because you have not been seen a real reaction from the army on the action that the American took. But the best thing is that it is believed, and it has been, in a certain way, even expressed by some people in the United States, that Maduro was taken by an information given by Delcy Rodriguez. So they wanted, so as she was the successor, and they probably in this.
So do you believe that Delcy Rodriguez gave some information?
Oh yes, I believe. I certainly believe that. That they have a lot of relation since long time with Grenell, and they have channels which they could inform, and that's done against their freedom, because they have a lot of measure on her head, specifically her, and they believed that Maduro was not going to withdraw because he was, even if he wanted, he was surrounded by more than 100 Cubans. And the Cubans, you know how they behave. They prefer him dead by them than in the hand of the states because he knows too much. So that if you see the way...
So hold on. I have to stop you and ask you that. The Cubans would prefer Maduro dead
Yes,
than with the Americans
of course.
because he knows too much
Of course.
About what?
Because Maduro is a man that was like the president of Mexico, that in the youth were prepared by the Cubans. And the Fidel Castro, when Chavez was dying in Cuba, I don't say they forced him, but they convinced him that the best man would be Maduro, a man that was firm in intelligence in Cuba. So he was, in a certain way, well, the word perhaps is excessive, but in a certain way, a puppet of the Cubans. And he was not...
Cuba is such a smaller country than Venezuela.
Yes, but they
How
have
do
intelligence
have this much
service.
control?
They have prepared on repression, on police, and those things that they have been, through the years, they have managed to build up something which is a son of NKVD or KGB, how do you call it, and Stasi of the German. So they are competent in that field. This is why they keep the full repression in the island. No? And for them, Venezuela was the jewel of the crown because they could not survive without the oil of Venezuela give them. Not only to make the electrical system work, but essentially when they gave them every month's oil to Cuba, they use a part in Cuba and the rest is sold at the market so that they could buy things that they need. So it was absolutely essential for them that Maduro stays in power. The Rodriguez are not an element from the Cuban. They are what they are. Special manipulators, quite intelligent, but they don't have the same origin than Maduro. And Diosdado Cabello, who came as a military, was really the one that, in opinion of the Chavismo, should have been the head, because he was part of the coup, and he was a military. So it's a very strange melange, where you have different kind of interests, and in a certain way, Maduro by himself had a lot of power, but he shared with the Minister of Defense, which is important to control the military, with the Rodriguez, which controlled the parliament. And you imagine the importance of the Rodriguez, that in succession, the first in succession is her, is the vice president. And you know who is the second in succession, if he dies or have whatever? Jorge Rodriguez, head of the parliament. So they were really the two that if something happened to Maduro, whatever, they would go in power. And
so it was clear when we saw the operation, on January 3rd, it was clear that the Americans had some inside intelligence.
More than inside, because they knew where he lived. He lived in a bunker. It's a house, but it's a bunker.
On a military base, I understand.
Basis.
Surrounded by Cuban security officials.
But he has no Venezuelan in his security. He doesn't trust Venezuela. So his security is totally... The Cuban has admitted...
So is that because Venezuelans were done with Maduro?
Well, if you see the election of 2024, the elected president won in all places. He didn't lose in one. And in the army quarters, he won also. So most of the military there voted for him. as the vote is secret, they cannot grasp who it is. But it is clear that they were not satisfied.
And it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 67% in favor of the opposition, 30% in
Yes,
favor of Maduro.
that's the result. And if if the Venezuelan, the 8 or 9 million people that would have voted, the difference would have been 80 to 20 or more, huh? Because those outside are in a big majority against him. Huh?
We've got a fair-sized Venezuelan community here in Canada.
And you don't see nobody
United
crying for Maduro.
Nobody crying for Maduro. We've got a bigger Venezuelan community in the United States,
And
in
they don't cry for
Colombia,
Maduro.
in Spain. No, as Andrew Lloyd Webber said, "Don't cry for me, Argentina."
Yes.
Nobody's crying for Maduro.
Certainly nobody, not even them, the one in power in this moment.
So,
Well, in power, temporarily.
what is your view then? I mean, of the Trump administration saying, we're going to run Venezuela for the time being. We've seen them
That's
take
important for the time being, and it's very well expressed. You know, the Trumps is not so.
Okay, then
You have to
please
hear
explain
more,
that, because there's a lot of. Hold on, just a second, Emilio, if I can set the table first. There's a lot of people in Canada, in the United States, saying, well, this is imperialism. This is Donald Trump just trying to take everything out of Venezuela. He will never give up power. There should be elections within 30 days, and he won't do that. What do you say to those people who are skeptical? I'm concerned about what comes next, but I'm willing to give them some time.
You have to listen not so much to Trump. That sometimes he improvised and he improvised and he confused Delcy with Maria Corina in one moment in his speech when he was not reading a text, but he was improvising. The key guy is the Secretary of State, and he's
Marco Rubio.
And Marco Rubio is the one who is running. Yes, he Hexet and that Miller, which I don't want to make any comment about him. But in any case, what Rubio said yesterday, he defined very clearly the 3 stages. I believe the first one had to be done as they had done. It's not imperialism. It's the only way that you can stabilize, bring peace, and make workable a country that is really in a condition, in a certain way, as bad as Haiti. It's impressive. You cannot imagine. As I tell, it's difficult to the people to know what Venezuela was, what Venezuela is today. Today there is no medium class. Medium class is poor now. The professor of the university, you see them begging almost, going to having whatever they can take because they don't have nothing. We don't have nothing. And I think the action that was planned, first of all, there has been a constant contact since long time ago between Maria Corina and Rubio, and not last week. All the team, they have very well prepared. When they get to the government, they are very capable to run the country. But they were not in the condition to run the transition, because the transition has a lot of things which are not very clear. This is not Syria, this is not Afghanistan, this is not Iraq. This is a condition, but still, when you hold the arms and the repression mechanism in your hand, you are dangerous. Because you have the power of fire, and the opposition has the power of ideas, and the people support them, but they don't have the arms either. So the more effective way to do, and I know that a lot of Venezuelans are not satisfied with that, but I am convinced that this is the right way to do it. First, stabilize. And the stabilization means that Diosdado Cabello, which has in his head $25 million, should be taken out, because if he continues there, then we have a certain amount of problem, except if we have the junta militar. And you know how a junta militar doesn't have to cover.
I don't think Donald Trump would appreciate that.
Well,
a military control.
No, certainly not. But perhaps it's a temporary option. But I think the best is working as they are doing now. There are certain things that is necessary to see, and Trump has insisted on freedom of political prisoners. Well, they are already dismantled the big torture place. They have started to dismantle yesterday, but they haven't freed the political prisoner. And Trump has said that.
I have to ask you this. The New York Times did have a piece that said Richard Grenell and others did not believe that Machado was ready to take over and do the transition. Do there have to be elections? Do they just put her
No. I am sure that
somebody else
now
in
Maria
place?
Corina understood that you have to have the transition, prepare, and have elections. Not very late, but you have to put the condition that...
So when do you think elections will be or should be?
I say no less than 6 months from now. Because...
Okay.
And as the shortest, the best for all. But depends of the control. So if...
But 30 days is too short. 30
days is impossible. So the shortest possible way is 90 days, as Rubio said. But I think it's more 6 months. 6 months is a term that you can stabilize, the economy start to grow. So you have a more stable. And the price of doing those things and ask the election, etc., it was difficult to put it in the head of a temporary president like the one who was elected. So I think that now Maria Corina understands that an election is going to happen. If an election is going to happen, and what Trump said yesterday was that all the political prisoners have to be free, and all the people that are outside, the exiled, have to come back. And that means also Maria Corina, which guarantees, means that if an election is done, perhaps Delcy Rodriguez, whatever she wants to put, can go against them, but she will win the elections because
Maria Corina
she hasn't the control of the army, but she has a strong. That they don't allow to publish the service, and we have service, but we cannot publish. And she still have an enormous popular support, and now even more.
So I'll leave you with this question, Emilio, and that is, you're old enough to remember when Venezuela was as free and as prosperous as somewhere like Canada.
Not only that, I knew the end of the last dictatorship. I was 15 years old.
So, but you remember when Venezuela was as free and prosperous as Canada. Do you believe that it will get there again?
Oh, yes, I am certain, because we have a certain advantage. The theme of the oil, that people speaks without knowing what they're talking, to rebuild capacity, which is important for us, will need 8 years, with an investment every year of $30,000 million. So this is Venezuela cannot do it. The company will do it, but they need security, no problem of delinquency, of corruption. So, and in that sense, Maria Corina will be an example. She will not allow that. And she has the best people in this country, in all the sectors, is working with them. And they were meeting 2 weeks ago with the Secretary of Treasury, with the IMF, so there is ready to do the job when they have the job. But the best thing is that Maria Corina wins the election. That will satisfy everyone, and they can compete. But we have to have the right of the free the political. We have around 886 political prisoners, among them the creme of the army. So the best and the youngest head of things that they will free. They have 186 military in prison, because they were not supporting Maduro. And I believe that this has nothing to do with imperialism, because to produce Venezuela has a potential, but that potential needs investment. And I believe that what essentially Trump wants is to take out the Chinese and the Russian and the Iran people from Venezuela. That Europe and the States and Canada, whatever, can invest, but not those competitors in geopolitical terms with them. So Venezuela is a mature country, and even the words of Trump are disliked by most Venezuelans, but we could not have done this success without what happened the 3rd of January. It was impossible.
Emilio, thank you very much.
I don't know if I put it clear, but I think Venezuela will be a good partner, and a good partner not only with the United States, but also with Canada and with Europe, because that's the mind of Maria Corina.
You have made it very clear. Thank you very much.
I hope that it was helpful what I said.
A quick break, but when we come back, my conversation with Freddy Guevara, a former member of the Venezuelan National Assembly. Back in moments.
This is Tristan Hopper, the host of Canada Did What?, where we unpack the biggest, weirdest, and wildest political moments in Canadian history you thought you knew until you what really happened. Stick around at the end of the episode to hear a sample of one of our favorite episodes. If you don't want to stick around, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get podcasts.
Freddy Guevara became involved in politics as a student in the early 2000s. By 2015, he was an elected member of the Venezuelan National Assembly, part of the Democratic Unity Roundtable. That's a coalition of politicians opposed to the regimes of Hugo Chavez and then Nicolas Maduro. A fierce opponent of Maduro, he was placed in jail, accused of ties to violent gangs, eventually put in solitary confinement, all for speaking out against the regime. He was eventually released and moved to the United States, where he's studying and lecturing at Harvard University's Kennedy School. Here is our conversation. So, Freddy, let me ask you, as a former member of the Venezuelan parliament, as an expatriate living in the United States right now, how did you feel when you woke up on the morning of January 3rd and heard what happened?
I know that it might be surprising for many people, but we feel happy. We feel happy because Maduro was out. And of course, no one would like to see their country being bombed. However, what we were hearing at that moment is that it was a very targeted operation, and that it was successful in the way that it captured the people that has been butchering many of our Venezuelan friends and families and people and millions of Venezuelans that are now outside. So, I think this reflects how desperate Venezuelans are. That even I know someone whose house was affected, and they told me if this is a price, I'm very happy to pay it, because what we've been suffering has been very tough for millions of Venezuelans all around the world, but particularly in Venezuela.
So having their home damaged was acceptable over having their life continue to be damaged.
Yeah. And it's, of course, and nobody will like that, right? We fought for many years for a different outcome. It's not like we said one day, oh, we want Maduro out, so let's get the Americans to take him. We've been fighting for so long, 25 years. But if we just count the Maduro era since 2013, at least 12 years trying to do negotiations, winning elections that we won twice. We won 2/3 of the parliament. I was vice president of the parliament because we won with 2/3 of the parliament. That's why he then closed it and then went after me twice. We tried international mediation. We tried national mediation. We even went to the United Nations. China and Russia vetoed everything. We went to the International Criminal Court, and the attorney that was in charge of the case was disbanded because His sister-in-law was the attorney of Maduro. We tried the Organization of American States, nothing worked. And we even tried that progressive governments that were kind of close to Maduro, like Lula in Brazil, Petro in Colombia, and Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico, mediated after he stole the election, and none of them helped. And at the end, Lula says his infamous words like, I am not going to keep trying, Venezuela is a problem of Venezuelans. So I think what I'm trying to say is like, don't be surprised if after all of this happens, Venezuelans are happy that an international government, in this case the United States, came and captured the people that has been butchering us.
So let me ask you then, you're describing all these international channels that you used or attempted to use, and none of them worked. And yet
Yeah.
we've got people in places like Canada, Western Europe, the United States saying, "Oh my goodness, oh, this violates international law. How dare you?"
Yeah.
You tried the international law route
Yeah. Yeah.
and you got nothing.
Yeah. I'm gonna find who said this because he's a Venezuelan and I would like to quote him, but I saw it in social media. He said, if the international order couldn't protect me or my friends from being captured and tortured, but can protect Maduro from being captured and facing a fair trial, then it's not just that the international order is not working, it's that it's working against me. And I agree with that. I'm not saying that I don't believe in norms. Of course, I would like a different world. But what I'm saying is like, it's not fair to defend an international order that has failed Venezuelans, but not only Venezuelans. It has failed people in Gaza, people in Myanmar, people in Israel, people in half of Africa, people, and we probably failed people in Ukraine and in Taiwan, because this international order that we have now is not protecting the people that have been oppressed.
I've long tried to tell Canadians who they've got a view of the United Nations and the international order that I say you're looking at it through rose-colored glasses. And I say
Yeah.
that as someone who wants to support and believe in multilateralism and all these things, that they have the potential for good, but they don't
For
live
sure.
up to their potential. And that sounds to me like what you're saying happened with you.
And I think, maybe we just have to evaluate the United Nations for what it is. It's just like, to prevent global wars, right? But how can
Hasn't worked
you?
in Ukraine.
Yeah, but you could say in a very cynic way that at least it's just in Ukraine, but that's why I meant global wars, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the role. But can we trust the United Nations in this sort of formal way when China and Russia can veto everything to prevent humanitarian disasters or autocracies being oppressing people? Well, of course not, right? So I don't know. I'm not saying that we have to give up on the United Nations. For sure, I'm not saying that we have to give up on the international order. But maybe it's the time that, democratic nations as Canada try to form an organization that is there to preserve the human rights and democracy. Because, it's a joke that in the Human Rights Committee, it's Cuba, Iran,
Yeah.
Syria. That's a joke. Come on. That doesn't make
I
sense.
remember talking to our former Foreign Affairs Minister, John Baird, about this. And one of the nations you mentioned had just risen to the top. And I said, how do they get there? And he
Yeah.
said, it's done alphabetically. And I
Yeah.
laughed and I couldn't believe it. And he said,
Yeah.
no, Brian,
Yeah.
that's true. It's just,
Yeah.
it's your turn. So it doesn't matter that you're a human rights abuser. Alphabetically, you're next. So
Yeah.
you get to run it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me get back to Venezuela, though. You were a parliamentarian. You were president of the parliament. But you also ended up being a political prisoner. How
Yeah.
did that happen, and what was that experience like? How long were you jailed for? What were the conditions?
When I was vice president of the parliament, Maduro tried to close the parliament. So we called people in the streets, we were protesting with them, and then Maduro went after me the first time. Before the police arrived to my place, I was able to escape, and the Chilean government gave me protection in the house of the ambassador. So I stood there in 3 years of house arrest. That was the first time. And then there was a negotiation process between the opposition and the regime. Kind of 100 political prisoners or persecuted people were released. I was part of that batch. And then 4 months later, they put me in jail again. But like this time, they captured me and they put me in a prison. I was for 38, for 38 days without seeing the sun. Well, actually, I saw the sun 3 times in a cell that had no windows, no air, natural air. I mean, and we were kind of in isolated, confinement, and of course with no rights at all. Maduro has. I wear the same outfit, the orange thing that Maduro was wearing with the same cuffs, only also like in the feet, and we didn't have the right to defend ourselves, unlike he's having it now. So, of course, the conditions were harsh, an experience that I would not recommend to anyone. However, I have to say that I am one of the few lucky ones that is free now, that it's alive, and that I have all my limbs. I have friends that were tortured. I know people who were raped. I know people who have back problems, bone problems because of the tortures they receive. And all of us has PTSD for sure and trauma. So all of us has psychologically be affected and emotionally be affected. However, I have to say that I feel lucky because even though all of these things happen to me, I'm alive and I'm free and I can tell this story.
So that's your experience as an elected official, as a parliamentarian.
Yeah.
And that is horrific.
Yeah.
That should not be happening. What is life like, or what was life like under Maduro for the average Venezuelan? Because this is a country that
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember it being one of the wealthiest, and if not the wealthiest in South America.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a country in line with Canada in terms of standards of living, in terms of GDP per capita, all of the standards that we would look to say, do you have a free and prosperous life? Venezuela was there,
Yeah.
and you lost that.
Yeah.
What was it like under Maduro for the average Venezuelan?
I would say that before getting into that point, that even though all you're saying is true, Venezuelans elected Chavez.
Mm-hmm.
So Chavez didn't came. Chavez is the
Elections have
predecessor.
consequences.
And what I mean with this is like, of course, we were in a perfect society. We had problems. Of course, we had inequality. We had a lot of issues. But what I'm saying here is that non-democracy is safe. And in the last years, and this is something I've been learning in my work now that at Harvard University, because since I'm in exile, I've been working there, particularly studying autocracies. Nowadays, most autocrats are elected. They don't come from coup d'etats. They are elected by the people. And from within the institutions, they start dismantling them. So I think my first cautionary tale will be like, yes, Venezuela was all like this, and still someone like Chavez rise to power. He was elected, and from within, he started dismantling the institutions and allowing us to have a state that was captured by all these mafias, international actors, bad actors that allowed Maduro to become what he became. Because Chavez died and then Maduro came into power with a fake election. So since Maduro started in power, I think the difference between Chavez and Maduro, I'm not judging their intentions, right? I cannot judge if one was better than the other. I think both were pretty bad. But I would say, like, in terms of how people were living, you had a very big difference because you had big prices of oil during the Chavez era, and he had popularity. So when an autocrat has popularity, he needs to use less of repression, and he needs to use less of the other tools that impedes people to take him out of power, because his main source of power is the people itself. So yes,
And
you
so
face.
did Chavez use that high price of oil to actually benefit the people of Venezuela? Did people feel like so they elected this guy who is an autocrat, who proposed socialism, which they had voted for, But did he use his power to take those high oil prices and distribute wealth to provide services to people, or was he like Maduro hoarding it?
Both. Both things can be true at the same time. And what I mean is like a lot of not cash transfer, sorry, but like social programs were created and a lot of money came into the country. But the biggest corruption that ever happened in our hemisphere occurred also during that era. I was also the first time that the judiciary authorities went after me. They didn't put me in prison, but they went after me. Was when I led as a congressman an investigation that proved that just in one case, listen this amount, one case, $8 billion disappeared. $8 billion. It was just one case that I just investigated. People said that overall, during the Chavez era, approximately $300 billion were missed. And this is something that is not just been saying by someone from the opposition. A lot of former ministers of Chavez agreed on this. Now, when we add the Maduro era, the thing is different because they didn't have enough money, so they needed to rely more on repression. So they started to coerce more people and to start killing and torturing more. I would say that before Chavez, you had corruption and selective repression, but let's say populism that was fueled by oil. And of course, the secret, or not that secret, but not as noisy, build up of a autocratic machine that was, taking control of all the powers. During the Maduro era, what we saw was like more poverty, economic crisis, the machinery actively persecuting people, and of course, a disaster in terms of a humanitarian disaster. So people in Venezuela have lived shortages of electricity all the time. If you are not part of the bubble, you might eat once or twice per day. If someone from the party of the regime wants your house or wants your girlfriend, they can easily put you in jail. And there's basically no rule of law at all. This is like the wild, wild west in a very, very deprived population. And it has to be this way because imagine how desperate you have to be in order to walk from Venezuela to Argentina or from Venezuela to the United States, knowing that meanwhile you can be deported, killed, trafficked, and all of this. Imagine how desperate a population can be.
And 8 million people left.
8 million people, and that's very close to the war in Ukraine and in Syria. But us, we don't have a formal war. So imagine the craziness of the situation in Venezuela. And this, again, if someone's hearing and saying, like, oh, these people from the opposition, these are not my numbers. These are the numbers, for example, of the United Nations.
So let me ask you then about the transition that's in place right now. The Maduro and his wife have been taken out, but Delcy Rodriguez is still in power. I'm sure you've seen the television coverage in the United States asking, why haven't you declared that you'll have elections within 30 days? Why aren't you putting Maria Corina Machado in power? What is your take on what should happen? Should there be an immediate transition to the opposition that was elected previously? Should there be new elections? Should there be a stabilization period? How do you handle this?
There's my ideal world, and there's what I think we can do. My ideal world.
Politics is the art of the possible, not the ideal.
Yeah.
So, what can be done?
So, in my ideal world, of course, Delcy Rodriguez will not be the president. It will be Edmundo Gonzalez, who was the one that won the election, and we will have all the military people saying like, "Yes, we understand this," and that's it. In the reality now, the Americans have taken a decision to play with the leftovers of Maduro to make them agree on a democratic transition. I don't trust that to happen, not because I don't trust the Americans or just because I don't trust the people who is in charge in Venezuela now. However, I still have the hope that they've learned through what happened to Maduro, they're not untouchables. But we have to be aware of these risk scenarios. The first one is that, for example, there's some discussions in the Senate and House, in the Congress in the United States about limiting actions of Trump's in Venezuela. If that happens, there will be no more stick, and rest assured that the the Maduro regime will stay, even without him, but the regime will stay.
So
The
that's
second
from
risk,
the Democrats are trying to restrict his
yeah,
ability to
yeah,
act in Venezuela. But
yeah,
if that happens, then Delcy Rodriguez stays in power.
yeah, for sure, because they only fear. They don't act on reasons. If they would act on reasons, if they would care about money, all the economic sanctions, all the diplomatic statements, all the mediation process would have worked. So this is people that are criminals. I think people feel that they are politicians. They are people that are more similar to Pablo Escobar than to, a normal or traditional dictatorship that exists, that have ever existed. So there's risk number two is that they believe they can convince the American oil to accept kind of what political scientists call competitive authoritarianism. Like they allowed to become kind of like, I don't know, maybe a China or Saudi Arabia in a milder version, like saying, okay, yeah, we open our markets, drill, baby, drill, but let us control the politics here. So maybe with, kind of elections, but not fair, something like that. I think that's a risk. And of course, the third risk is that the the leftovers of Maduro plays against Trump's in the way that they think that they can outsmart them and they buy time, and then something geopolitical happens, or there's a shift in power in the United States and they remain. I think those are their three bets, and that's why this needs to happen fast, and it will require not only the Americans, but everyone in the international community that really cares about democracy, makes all the right decisions in order to help us achieve this democratic transition.
I look at Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who has a Cuban background,
Yeah.
who is very concerned about Latin America and is concerned about democracy in that region. That gives me a bit of hope. Does it give you hope that he
Yeah.
has a
Yeah,
personal
for sure.
connection to that?
For sure. I met, it's not like I am a friend of Marco Rubio, no. When I met him twice or thrice, and before he was a state, when he was in Senate and I was in
Mhm.
Congress, I met him. And I don't only know him, I know people from his staff, and I know the things he's saying publicly and in private. And it gives me a lot of, let's say, trust, or I'm optimistic because A, I believe that he really cares about democracy, and B, he understands what he's playing against. So I think he's not going to be fooled by these guys that always try to fool everyone.
Hmm. Yeah, that's my feeling of it. And you know, I can look to the noise and all of the bluster around the president and some of his staff and what people are saying. And then I look to Marco Rubio and I feel like, okay, there's a man there that has some sense of what's happening. That gives me some hope. I asked you at the start about the the feeling of people in Venezuela, and while you're in the United States, while you're in the Boston area now, you're still regularly in touch with people there. How do they feel about the campaign leading up to this, the strikes on the boats, things like that? Were those supported? Were those opposed?
You know that this is a very interesting question. And you know what? Many people don't even know what happened, or don't even know that that happened. Why? Because there's a lot of censorship. And weirdly, the Maduro regime didn't claim those victims. Well, maybe it's not weirdly, right? Because maybe if they would say, yeah, those are my people, it would be a recognition of they will be involved in
Oh, so you
trafficking.
are a drug trafficker.
Yeah. And also, they were playing this psychological strategy within their own bases like, no, no, the Americans not going to engage. Don't worry, this is all bluff. So I think that this kind of, in one hand, censorship, in the second hand, not having the government saying, hey, someone killed Venezuelans, this is unfair, or whatever, that created like this mixed approach with Venezuelans that they don't really know if that happened or not. So they see it in social media, but really the only version is the American version because the side that was supposed to defend those people never spoke up because of their political strategy.
What about the seizure of the Russian ghost ship and the treatment of the oil? How do you expect that to play out over the next few months?
First, I will have to say that I understand also, like from the outside, many people would say, like, okay, you know what, this is not good. This is Trump taking people's oil. And as I said before, of course, we would like a different outcome in general, right? We would like that all resources will be managed for Venezuelans elected by Venezuelans. However, I think it's very important to remark or remind that we lost our sovereignty many years ago, not now. Venezuelans haven't been taking the benefits of our oil since many decades ago. Most of our oil fields are being exploited by Chinese, Russian, Cuban, and Iranian companies. Many of this money is not even paid. For example, China is still taking almost 500 million barrels, I believe, because of the debt. So we're paying debt of money that were stolen many years ago. So China is receiving, or was receiving for a long time, basically barrels of oil to pay a debt. And Cuba was receiving a lot of oils for free too. For example, to pay the military protection that they gave to Maduro. That for many years, we Venezuelans said that were happening, and people told that we were exaggerating. And now the Cuban dictatorship have recognized that 32 Cubans were killed in the military operation that took Maduro out. So what I will have to say is like, Venezuelans don't feel that this oil was never ours. I mean, like in the last decades. So I don't think that anyone thinks that, oh, they're taking away their oil. I think that probably they see it as a sign of hope that maybe at least this oil will not be used to torture us.
So, in terms of the claims that the United States is going to come in, big American oil companies will invest. Look, we have our own oil patch in Canada. There's been a lot of anxiety about Venezuelan oil coming back on the market because that could impact our economy.
Yeah.
But we understand, look, American companies investing in your oil patch can be very good, very lucrative for you. Yes, they're going to make profit, but so will the people who get the jobs, the governments that get the taxes. So you're not afraid of that happening.
Sadly, I will say that you don't have to worry too much because our industry is so destroyed that it will take years to be restored. So I say it really with, full of full of sadness, because I believe that, what we had was so important that these guys destroyed at every level that it's going to take a long time. But the second thing is that I think that, I don't know, maybe this is more like a policy question that I'm saying now, or an approach, but I do believe that to get to the green transition, we will need to make also use of fossil fuels to get into that stage. And a lot of energy is going to also be required to make, these new forms and the green transition that we all want. So I am hopeful that we're going to be able to restore industry. However, I think like for all of the reasons that I said now, and also like how the world is being shaped, I'm afraid that we will have to rethink the way we think about our country. And Venezuela cannot be longer a country that just relies on its commodity, and that hopefully this will help us to also achieve a more diversified and fair economy that brings more of the people's talents into, into the production of a new era.
Well, as I was telling a friend recently, Freddie, I'm looking forward to a Venezuelan vacation one day. So I hope we get to the.
Amazing. You have to go. It's beautiful. I miss it so much.
I hope you found both of these conversations to be enlightening, to bring a different point of view than what you've heard elsewhere. This is a growing and ongoing story, one that will evolve over the coming weeks, and one that we will continue to follow. Full Comment is a post-media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Prue. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Please remember to hit the subscribe button, leave us a review, put a comment down, share us on social media, or email us to your friends and family. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
Here's that clip from Canada Did What? I promised you.
So, although abortion was sort of accessible, it really wasn't.
But then 1988 rolls around. And what's the law on abortion then? Suddenly, there wasn't one. Literally no restrictions existed in 1988. Abortion went from heavily restricted to completely unrestricted almost overnight. There was no referendum on this. There wasn't even an act of parliament. This whole thing is due to a somewhat surprise decision out of the Supreme Court of Canada. And it came about in large part because of one man, a Canadian doctor who had been relentless about running illegal abortion clinics since the 1960s and was determined to overturn the laws prohibiting the practice. Along the way, he endured multiple arrests, constant raids, a jail term, a firebombing of his clinic, an attack by a fanatic wielding garden shears, the approbation of virtually his entire profession, and frequent death threats. If you want to hear the rest of the story, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get your podcasts.